Then, and now you begin to see the Bantustan emerging. Because in the last few years, we've gone from occupation to apartheid. Israel is now thinking specifically in terms of apartheid. It even calls its policy apartheid. Jimmy Carter wrote about this, and he got a firestorm. But in fact, we talk about apartheid. That's our... Apartheid in Afrikaans means separation. That's what it means, apart, apartheid. We call our policy towards the Palestinians hafradah in Hebrew, which is separation. We use the word apartheid, we just say it in Hebrew instead of in Afrikaans. But that's the concept. It's the same concept that we want to control. In South Africa, when you wanted a white ethnocracy, a country that belonged to white people and a democracy, what do you do with the black people, the black Africans? Well, they shoved them into 10 Bantustans, little crazy countries, 10 little countries, and they called them homelands. So even there, the use of language was very important. I mean, who's going to oppose a homeland for, you know, for black Africans? So they created 10 crazy little unviable homelands on 11% of the land of South Africa for the vast majority of the population. That then left 89% of South Africa free and democratic for the white population. That's an ethnocracy. It's the same logic here. What do we do with the Palestinians? And this is where I go back to that point. All right, this is all the land of Israel. We claim it. It's ours. It's exclusive. Palestinians don't count. But what are we going to do with them? I mean, we're stuck with them. That's the problem. You know, we can't throw them out of the country like we tried to do in '48 because, I mean, it doesn't look very good for our image to put it's 4 million people. So it's really not doable. We talk about transfer. And that's a word that's used in the government and the press freely in conversation. Nobody's ashamed of it. We talk about it, but it can't really be done on that massive scale. We can't give, all right, you can say, all right, if this is all the land of Israel, fine, but we can't give the Palestinian citizenship. Because if we're a democracy, because then it wouldn't be a Jewish state. That's the ethnocratic part. And we won't give them a state on the 22% because that's too much land. This is our land. So we have to try to give, again, I'm saying the dilemma is, how do we keep control of the land and yet get rid of the Palestinians? Getting rid of the Palestinians meaning to confine them to a Bantustan. And here you begin to see the cantons emerging. Because what Barak did, Ehud Barak, the Labour Prime Minister, so this isn't some right-wing plan of Sharon. The Labour Party, which is supposed to be the left, Rabin, Paris, you know, kind of the more liberal, the Democrats, I mean, they're even more complicit because they're the smarter ones that are putting it together. So what Barak did is he said, okay, to create these cantons, to create this Bantustan, we have to then define what we want to keep and what we're willing to give up, in a sense. And that was the whole idea of Camp David. All right, the Camp David negotiations. And so Barak defined 7 settlement blocks. That's these kinds of areas. 7 of them that then Israel keeps. It keeps Israeli control. Israel controls the border. With Jordan, it controls the water. It cuts the West Bank in half this way, so it destroys the freedom of movement. The settlements sit on top of the largest water aquifers, so Israel controls the water. It controls the greater Jerusalem area, which means the Palestinians lose Jerusalem. Jerusalem, according to the World Bank, accounts for 40% of the Palestinian economy. So this Israeli Greater Jerusalem cuts the economic heart out of any Palestinian state. And then there's a salient coming up here to Hebron. So this is Barak's, what Barak did. So the settlement blocks are yet another element in the matrix, and this is part of the whole reconfiguration of the country, is a whole matrix of highways that have been established throughout not only the West Bank, but here's where they begin to become incorporated into Israel. During the Oslo peace process, and we're talking about the status of the land, sovereignty, borders, Jerusalem. Israel built with American funding. This is Clinton, so we can't blame Bush for everything, right? With American funding, Israel built 29 major highways that linked the settlement blocks into Israel proper, Israeli-only highways. And they link it into a big highway project inside Israel that's called the Trans-Israel Highway that goes from north to south, and the idea is to move, most Israelis live along the coast. And then you have the settlements here. And the problem was, in the middle was either empty, because there's only a few little poor towns here, or in this area, it's heavily Palestinian. This is called the Triangle. And Jews didn't want to move in there. So in a way, there was this barrier between the Jewish population on the coast and the Jewish populations in the settlements. So how do you knit them together? The Trans-Israel Highway was built to be the new demographic spine of the country. So that once you put a highway in, you begin to get all kinds of urban development along the highway that closes this barrier. And then, so Ariel here, in the middle of the West Bank, with this highway, is 20 minutes from Tel Aviv. I mean, it's a dormitory suburb. So in other words, you've really reconfigured the country so that what was once on the side that could be a Palestinian state is today simply an integral part of Israel. And finally, the last element, or not the last, but the last one I'll talk about, element of the matrix is the wall. And you can see that, now after what we've talked about, you can see that the logic of the wall is not security. Security has nothing to do with the wall. If it was really security, it would be built along the border. But it isn't. Look where it's built. You can see, look. The wall conforms to areas A and B. Because it's a border. Because this is the border that defines the canton. But when you hit a settlement block, you see it goes around the settlement block. Like this. So it incorporates 80% of the settlers and creates the cantons of the Bantustan. So that where we're headed for them is towards this. From the two-state solution that itself wasn't really just, but the Palestinians could have lived with it. Even with that small state, they had territorial contiguity, given that there's some connection between Gaza and the West Bank. They had borders with Arab countries, with Jordan and Egypt. They had a seaport, they had an airport. They had Jerusalem and Bethlehem as tourist resource centers. In other words, they had water, they had agriculture, they had a shot, and a pretty good shot at a viable state. A small state, but it could have worked. But this is what Israel's a concept of a two-state solution is. And that is, of course, a Bantustan in the old South African use of the term, in which the Palestinians are now confined to 15% of the land, and Israel expands out to 85% and really controls the entire country.